sky me, where brains go to broadcast.
All right, let's dive in. So imagine this.
Yeah.
You've got this just pile of articles, maybe research papers, your own notes even, all stacked up.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to get to the heart of it, fast. How do you actually cut through all that noise and really understand what's the most important stuff in your materials?
It's a really common problem, isn't it? Whether you're maybe a student working on a paper or a professional trying to make sense of, say, industry reports.
We're just curious.
Exactly, or just curious about something new. The sheer amount of information can feel, well, pretty overwhelming.
Totally. And that's really what our deep dive is focused on today. We're digging into what our sources are calling the art and science of research writing in the academic disciplines.
Right.
But here's the interesting bit, and it's not just for students, right? This is more about understanding how knowledge actually gets well made.
And communicated, yeah. And maybe most importantly, how you can become a more authoritative, more effective communicator, really, no matter what field you're in.
Okay, so our mission today then is what? To unpack these core principles, the ones that sort of guide research and writing everywhere.
Yeah, across all the academic disciplines, pulling out the key insights from the sources we've looked at. We'll explore how knowledge isn't really static. It evolves through these things called discourse communities.
Discourse community.
And then, yeah, we want to get really practical. How can you actually establish your own authoritative voice when you're working with sources? How do you make them work for you instead of the other way around?
Got it. So let's start with these universal foundations you mentioned. Because you might think, physics and literature, they seem like totally different worlds in how they operate.
They do on the surface.
But the sources are saying deep down, the core principles of research and writing are actually maybe surprisingly similar.
That's exactly right. I mean, they all involve critical reading, critical writing, active and creative interpretation of sources, of data, and, crucially, writing rhetorically. So the basic approach to asking questions, building arguments, it stays pretty consistent.
But then, why? If the core is the same, why do the assignments, the research methods, how people talk about results, even the formatting and citations, look so wildly different?
Yeah.
An accounting report doesn't look anything like a political science study or, a biology search result for cystic fibrosis. The parameters are just completely different.
And this is where that powerful idea of rhetoric really comes into play. These differences are, as our source puts it, rhetorical in nature.
Rhetorical. Meaning?
Well, think about it like this. You wouldn't explain a complex medical diagnosis to a 5-year-old the same way you'd explain it to another doctor, right?
Right, of course not.
That's rhetoric. Choosing your words, your structure, your evidence to persuade that specific audience. So researchers and writers in different fields, they conform to the expectations of their intellectual community.
Ah, okay. To make sure they're understood by that group.
Exactly. They're basically speaking the language of their audience, whether it's a business report for stakeholders or scientific data for fellow researchers.
That makes a lot of sense. So this awareness of the audience, the rhetoric, is huge. And it makes you think about your own work or studies you've done. Haven't you sort of naturally adjusted how you present things depending on who you're talking to or the context?
Yeah, most people do it intuitively to some extent.
So understanding why gives you an edge.
Definitely. And, despite all this surface variety, there are still some non-negotiables, principles that hold true across all disciplines.
Like what?
Well, the main purpose of academic writing is always to generate and communicate new knowledge, new ideas. It's not just about rehashing what's already out there.
So it's about adding something, building, not just reporting.
Precisely. Academic writers always write from sources. That means new ideas, your conclusions, your theories, they're built on the foundation of existing research. And that demands, careful checking of those sources. Are they credible? Are they appropriate for what you're trying to do?
Makes sense.
And of course, meticulously citing everything. Acknowledging all your sources, using whatever system is accepted in that particular field, that's how knowledge gets built, layer by layer, transparently.
Okay, so we've got the common ground and the differences, which are sort of rhetorical. But what about the why behind it all? Why do we research and write like this?
That brings us to these intellectual communities, right?
Yeah, and it means we need to ditch that old image, the lonely scholar.
Hunched over dusty books.
Yeah, exactly. Churning out knowledge all alone in some tower. That's mostly a myth now.
So knowledge making is more collaborative.
Very much so. It's a collaborative effort,
Yeah.
as the source says. Lots of people contribute. It's not just individual genius, it's collective work. And that brings us to discourse communities.
Okay, discourse communities, like specialized clubs. That's a good way to put it, yeah. If you want to join the conversation in, say, climate science or maybe abstract art, you've got to learn their specific language, their shorthand, their shared assumptions.
The discourse.
Exactly. These are groups that share interests, and they use very specific language, the discourse, to communicate effectively within that group.
So if you're part of an academic discipline, that's your discourse community. You're all reading the same stuff, talking about the same things, using the same kind of technical language.
Pretty much, and that's why the writing can look so different between fields. They're literally using different technical vocabularies, building on different shared understandings.
But they don't always agree, right, these communities?
Oh, definitely not. That's actually key. And they don't even need to be in the same place physically anymore. Debates, disagreements, discussions, whether in journals, at conferences, online, that's what advances knowledge. It's through that ongoing conversation that understanding evolves.
Okay, this is leading somewhere really interesting. This idea of how knowledge actually progresses. You mentioned Thomas Kuhn.
Yes, his book from 1962, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, hugely influential.
Now, he was talking about science, natural science.
He was, but his theory is now seen as relevant to pretty much all academic fields, including, whatever field you might be interested in.
So what was this big idea?
He talked about the accepted paradigm. Think of it as the standard theory, the accepted way of doing things within a discipline at a given time.
Okay.
So when a community accepts a new paradigm, most of the work then focuses on expanding it, not really changing it. People operate with shared assumptions, they use the same methods, they present results in similar ways.
And that creates consistency.
Yes, and it allows them to share work easily, and importantly, it creates a kind of shared version of reality. If everyone's using the same theory and methods, their results are generally accepted as, well, truth or fact within that community.
A shared reality.
Yeah.
That sounds powerful. But doesn't that also risk, getting stuck? If everyone's just working within the same box, how does that reality ever actually change?
Well, that's where anomalies come in.
Anomalies?
Yeah, unusual things, unexpected results, stuff that the current paradigm just can't explain. It doesn't fit the model.
Okay.
And when these anomalies pile up, when they become too significant to just ignore or explain away, that's when you can get a paradigm shift.
A revolution, basically.
Exactly. Old knowledge gets questioned, maybe discarded, replaced by new knowledge. An older version of reality gets replaced by a newer one. It's a fundamental shakeup of understanding.
And the classic example is Copernicus, right? The idea that the Earth goes around the sun.
That's the one. It seems obvious now, but at the time, it was a truly radical paradigm shift. It completely overturned centuries of accepted understanding about, well, the entire universe.
Wow. It's a good reminder, like the source says, that even scientific truths that seem constant and unshakable are subject to revision and change.
Absolutely, which raises a really important question for us, for anyone writing or researching. How does this instability of knowledge connect to how we handle information, especially things presented as fact?
Yeah, because we're often taught to think of fact and opinion as like complete opposites, black and white. Fact is objective, verifiable. Opinion is just personal, maybe unverifiable.
Right, and that simple view can actually cause problems for writers, especially when they're starting out.
How so?
Well, they might be too afraid to actually commit to a viewpoint, So their papers just end up summarizing what others have said. No real argument.
Just playing it safe.
Or the opposite happens. They rely only on personal opinions, thinking, well, everyone's entitled to their opinion. Which is true in life, but in academic work, it's unpersuasive if it's not backed by evidence and reasoning.
In both ways, you're not really doing the work of research, which is to learn and maybe add something new.
Exactly. And it makes your writing less authoritative. You're not guiding the reader. You're just reporting or opining without support.
But the really key insight here, thinking about Kuhn, is that what eventually becomes an accepted theory, maybe even a fact within a field, it probably started out as someone's opinion, or at least a controversial idea. It needed persuasion, evidence, argument to get accepted.
Precisely. Research knowledge making, they're not just social processes, they're deeply rhetorical. Persuasion is key. Our understanding changes over time through this constant back and forth, this debate and discussion.
Which means your own voice, Your ability to build a persuasive argument using sources, it actually matters a lot.
It really does. It's a dynamic thing. I mean, think about your own field, if you have one, or even just a topic you know well. Can you think of a time when a fact you learned was later overturned or significantly changed?
Yeah, definitely. Or something that was once considered fringe is now mainstream.
It happens constantly. And you, as a writer and researcher, you're potentially part of that process.
The source actually gives a great concrete example of tracing this kind of evolution, looking at the discussion around cloning.
Right. The author starts with a personal interest sparked by stem cell research, an article, and Ron Reagan's speech back in 2004 about Alzheimer's potential.
Okay, so personal connection first. Then what?
Then just a quick library search for human cloning. Turns up 87 books just between 1978 and 2004 with a real spike in the 90s.
Shows growing interest.
Definitely. Then database searches. PubMed, the medical database, over 2,500 results. LexisNexis Congressional for legislative stuff, over 100 documents. It just shows the huge scale of the conversation.
And the history itself is fascinating. We all remember Dolly the sheep, right? Cloned in 96, announced 97.
Yeah, and her death in 2003 kind of fueled the debate that really brought cloning into the public eye. But the idea itself, creating life in a lab, goes way back.
How far back?
Medieval alchemists, the whole idea of the homunculus, a tiny, fully formed human made in a lab.
Wow, okay, so that shows the paradigm shifts perfectly.
Exactly. In the Middle Ages, the homunculus was, believe it or not, a plausible paradigm for some. Then, fast forward to the 1990s with Dolly. What do you see?
Excitement, obviously, but also surprise, maybe skepticism.
Yeah, the source mentions a 1998 article using cautious words like reportedly, and another one from 98 immediately raising ethical and legal flags about human cloning, even while acknowledging the science. The conversation was shifting rapidly.
And then by 2003, 2004, after Dolly.
Well, the company that cloned Dolly struggled, but the ability to clone, that wasn't really doubted anymore by the scientific community.
So the debate changed focus.
Completely. It shifted away from if we can do it to the legal, ethical, political, ideological questions. You even had Congress enacting laws about stem cell research. Public discussion drove policy.
So the takeaway for us as writers.
It's that what seems like an indisputable fact today might have been an anomaly or just an opinion not that long ago. Attitudes change, right? Sometimes because of new science, new techniques.
Internal factors.
Right, and sometimes because of external things like the cultural mood or political climate. Academic discussions don't happen in a vacuum. They're tied to society. And your writing becomes part of that ongoing evolution.
Okay, this all builds towards a really crucial point.
Yeah.
How do we become authoritative writers in this context? When we talk about authoritative writing, what does that actually mean?
It means writing where you, the author, are clearly in control. You're guiding the reader, your voice is present, you're not just passively relaying information.
And that sounds like a big challenge, especially for new writers in a field.
It is. There's this great phrase from a writing teacher, David Bartholomew. He says, every beginning academic writer has to invent the university.
Invent the university.
Yeah, meaning you have to learn the content of the field and its specific ways of talking, its discourse conventions, all at the same time.
That sounds intimidating. It can make you feel insecure, like you don't belong or don't have the right to speak up yet.
Exactly. And that insecurity often leads to a common problem, letting the sources control your writing.
Oh yeah, I've been there. Your paper ends up sounding like just a string of quotes or summaries.
Right. Precisely. The source we used had an example paragraph about video game violence where literally every sentence came from somewhere else.
So there's no actual writer there, no new insight, just a collection.
Right. It fails the whole purpose, which is to create new knowledge or perspective.
So what's the solution? How do we take control back?
The core idea is pretty simple, really. Resist just summarizing or quoting for the sake of filling space. Your goal is to create and express your own theories, your own opinions about the topic. Use the sources as, like, building blocks for your argument, not the whole building itself.
Make the sources work for you.
That's the key.
Okay, so practically speaking, how do we do that? What are the actual techniques?
Well, there are three main ways to integrate source material effectively. First, direct quoting.
Okay.
Now, you use this when you want to capture not just the information, but the specific voice, the tone, the feeling of the original. Maybe it's really striking language you couldn't say better yourself.
But use it sparingly.
Yes, definitely sparingly. The source had that example about the J.D. Green slave narrative. Out of maybe 10 lines discussing his life, only 2 lines were a direct quote, a really emotional part. The rest was the author's analysis.
So what's a good balance?
A good rule of thumb is maybe 70–80% your own writing, your own analysis and argument, and only 20–30% quoted material. That ensures your contribution is clear.
Okay, so quoting is like adding a specific spice, not the main ingredient. What's next?
Summarizing. This is where you give a shortened version of the original passage, but entirely in your own words.
Right. Condensing it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The key is to keep all the important info and arguments, but make it much shorter. It's great for distilling complex stuff down to its essence for your reader, like the ADHD example. The summary focused on the core insight about it transferring to adulthood and the specific problems that causes.
Got it. And the third technique?
Paraphrasing. This means rewriting the original passage in your own words, but keeping it roughly the same length as the original.
Okay, so why not just summarize if you're using your own words?
Good question. Paraphrasing is really useful for helping you truly understand and own the ideas. You have to process it deeply to put it in your own language while keeping the detail. It forces you closer to forming your own viewpoint on it.
Thanks.
And crucially, it helps avoid unintentional plagiarism. You're demonstrating you understand it well enough to rephrase it completely, not just swap out a few words. The Fighting the Image Wars example showed this, rephrasing the points about WWII censorship in your own style.
So it's about weaving these techniques together with your own ideas. It sounds like a bit of an art form.
It kind of is. The source uses a nice analogy, weaving a thread of one color into a carpet of another. Your ideas and the source material combine to make a pattern, but your thread, your voice, should be the dominant one.
And there's a rhythm to it.
There is. The sequence usually goes, introduce the source and say why you're using it, how it supports your point. Then you, quote, summarize or paraphrase the relevant bit. And then, this is key, comment on it. Explain its significance, connect it back to your argument, and use it to set up your next idea.
That keeps the flow going and keeps you in charge.
Exactly. It creates a smooth, authoritative flow where your voice is clearly leading the discussion.
And how do you make it super clear to the reader when you're shifting between your voice and a source's voice?
That's where signal phrases come in. They're essential.
Signal phrases.
Yeah, short phrases that act like signposts for the reader. They tell them, okay, now I'm hearing from an external source. Simple things like, according to Smith, or Jones argues that, or as the study states, or Williams writes that, or even author contends that.
So they just flag it.
They flag it, yeah.
Yeah.
They prepare your reader for what's coming and why it's relevant to your argument. It makes the whole thing much clearer and, again, more authoritative because you're explicitly managing the sources.
This is all super practical. I mean, think about it. If you listening have a report to write or a presentation to give, any kind of research you need to pull together, how can you use these techniques? Quoting just the essential bits, summarizing core ideas, paraphrasing to really own it, and using those signal phrases. It's all about making your voice, your argument, stronger.
It really is. It's about being the guide for your reader, not just a tour guide pointing out things others have said. It's about empowering your own insights within that larger conversation.
So we've definitely covered a lot of ground today. We started with those core principles, both the universal ones and the discipline-specific ones.
These are mostly rhetorical differences.
Right. Then we looked at how knowledge isn't static, how it's this dynamic social process shaped by discourse communities and those big paradigm shifts.
Yeah, and how that blurs the simple line between fact and opinion sometimes.
And then we got into the really practical stuff, how to actually build your own authority when you're working with sources, using them effectively without letting them take over.
Ultimately, becoming a good researcher and writer, it's not really about memorizing a bunch of rigid rules. No, it's more about developing what the source calls rhetorical sensitivity. Understanding the conversation, the community conventions, the audience. It's an ongoing learning process.
So maybe a final thought for everyone listening to chew on.
Yeah.
What fact in your own field, or maybe just something you take for granted today, could actually be an anomaly right now? Something that might lead to a whole new way of thinking, a paradigm shift down the road.
That's a great question. And how will your voice, your authoritative argument, informed by how you engage with your sources, contribute to that ongoing evolution?
Because knowledge, like language itself, it's always moving, always changing.
And you're part of shaping it.
Cascade me where brains go to broadcast. Cascade me, knowledge speaks, tuition sleeps.